Long, long ago, before many towns and cities dotted the land, the heart of America stretched out in endless green. This was a place called the Great Plains, and in what we now call Colorado, the sky felt impossibly big. Here, the wind whispered through tall grasses, carrying the scent of wildflowers and the distant rumble of thunder. This vast, beautiful land was home to many Native American tribes. Among them were the Cheyenne and the Arapaho people, who lived in harmony with the natural world around them. They were skilled hunters, especially of the mighty buffalo, which provided them with everything they needed: food, clothing, and shelter. Their homes were tipis, easy to move as they followed the buffalo herds across the plains. Children laughed as they played games, learning the ways of their elders. Stories were told around warm fires, teaching lessons about courage, respect, and the spirits of the land. The rivers provided fresh water, and the earth gave them plants for medicine and food. Life was lived simply, guided by the sun, moon, and seasons. The Cheyenne and Arapaho believed in living in balance, taking only what they needed and honoring all living things. Their days were filled with work, family, and ceremonies, all connected to the rhythm of their ancestral lands. But as the years passed, change began to sweep across these peaceful plains. From the east, more and more people, called settlers, started to move west. They built new towns, dug for gold, and brought different ways of living to the land. With these new people came soldiers sent by the United States government. One of these soldiers was a man named Colonel John Chivington. Colonel Chivington was a tall, strong man with a serious face. He had once been a preacher, telling people about God, but now he wore a soldier's uniform and carried a gun. He was in charge of a group of soldiers called the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. These men were not like the peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho. They were trained for fighting and followed orders without question. Colonel Chivington believed it was his job to protect the new settlers and make the land safe for them, even if it meant pushing the Native American tribes away. He and his soldiers rode across the plains, their uniforms a stark contrast to the natural colors of the land. Their presence brought a new kind of sound to the quiet plains, the clinking of armor, the marching of boots, and the stern commands of their leader. A shadow of worry began to fall over the hearts of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people as they watched these new arrivals, with their strange ways and powerful weapons. With the arrival of more settlers and soldiers, the peaceful balance of the plains began to shift. It was like two different rivers trying to flow in the same space, bumping and clashing. The Native American tribes had lived on the land for hundreds of years, knowing every creek and hill. But the new settlers saw the land differently. They wanted to build farms, fences, and roads, changing the very face of the plains. Small problems started to grow into bigger ones. Sometimes, settlers would cross into hunting grounds, scaring away the buffalo that the tribes depended on. Other times, Native American warriors, feeling angry or protective of their land, would raid settler camps or take horses. These were not big wars at first, but rather small fights and misunderstandings that chipped away at trust. A lost cow, a broken promise, a fear of the unknown. Each little thing added to the growing tension, like tiny sparks flying near dry grass. Both sides felt afraid and misunderstood. The Native Americans saw their ancient ways threatened, while the settlers worried about their new homes and safety. This growing unease created a dangerous feeling in the air, a sense that something bad might happen if a way to peace wasn't found soon. The growing worries on the plains led some wise leaders to seek a path to peace. Among them was a respected Cheyenne chief named Black Kettle. He was a man who wanted his people to live without fear, to continue their traditions, and to find a way to share the land without fighting. Black Kettle met with U.S. government officials, hoping to make a clear agreement. After much talk, a promise was made. The government told Chief Black Kettle and his people that if they moved their camp to a specific spot called Sand Creek, they would be safe. They were told to fly an American flag and a white flag over their camp as a sign of peace and friendship. These flags would show everyone that they were friendly and under the protection of the United States. Believing in the promise, Chief Black Kettle gathered his people, along with some Arapaho families, and moved to the designated area along Sand Creek. The camp was set up with their tipis, and the flags were proudly raised, fluttering in the Colorado wind. The people settled into their new home, trusting that the agreement would keep them safe from harm. They hoped that this move would finally bring an end to the fear and allow them to live in peace once more. The morning of November 29, 1864, dawned cold and still over Sand Creek. In the Cheyenne and Arapaho camp, the fires were just beginning to warm, and the sounds of waking children filled the air. They were safe, or so they believed, under the flags of peace fluttering above their tipis. The American flag and the white flag, symbols of the agreement, were clearly visible for all to see. But in the pre-dawn darkness, a different kind of movement was taking place. Colonel Chivington and his soldiers had ridden through the night, their horses, hooves muffled by the soft earth. With great stealth, they moved around the sleeping camp, quietly positioning themselves. Like shadows, the soldiers spread out, forming a wide circle that completely surrounded the unsuspecting people. No alarms were sounded, no warnings given. The camp was full of men, women, and children, many still asleep in their warm blankets. The peaceful calm of the morning was a stark contrast to the hidden danger that now encircled them. The soldiers held their weapons ready, their faces grim in the fading moonlight. The stage was set for a terrible betrayal as the sun began to peek over the horizon, unaware of the horror it was about to witness. As the first rays of sun touched the eastern sky, a sudden, terrible noise shattered the morning peace. With a loud yell and the thunder of hooves, Colonel Chivington's soldiers charged into the camp. The Cheyenne and Arapaho people, just starting their day, were caught completely by surprise. Fear, sharp and cold, gripped every heart. Chief Black Kettle, hearing the shouts and gunfire, quickly grabbed the American flag that had been given to him as a sign of peace. He held it high, along with the white flag of surrender, hoping the soldiers would see them and stop. He believed the flags would protect his people, as promised. But the soldiers did not stop. They rode right past the waving flags, their guns firing. The sounds of war filled the air, gunshots, shouts, and the terrified cries of women and children. It was a chaotic and brutal scene. The peaceful camp, meant to be a safe haven, was suddenly a place of terror. The soldiers, instead of seeing friends or people under protection, seemed to see only enemies. The very symbols meant to bring safety, the U.S. flag and the white flag of peace, were ignored in the heat of the attack. What unfolded next was not a battle, but a brutal slaughter. The camp was not a war party, but a community of families. Many of the Cheyenne and Arapaho men were away hunting, leaving behind mostly women, small children, and the elderly. These were not warriors with weapons, but grandmothers cooking breakfast, mothers comforting their babies, and little ones playing by the creek. The soldiers showed no mercy. They fired their guns into the tipis, at people running in fear, and at anyone they saw. The air was filled with screams and the smell of gunpowder. Children, too small to understand, cried for their parents. Old men and women, too frail to run fast, fell to the ground. It was a scene of pure horror, where innocence met unchecked violence. Some people tried to hide in the creek bed, digging holes in the sand for protection. But even there, they were found and attacked. The soldiers continued their rampage for hours, turning the peaceful camp into a place of unthinkable sorrow and death. The promise of safety, the trust in the flags, all were shattered into a million pieces. The sun that had just risen to greet a new day now shone down on a terrible tragedy, staining the earth of Sand Creek with innocent blood. When the horrifying attack finally ended, the scene at Sand Creek was one of utter devastation. The lively camp, once filled with tipis, laughter, and daily activities, was now a silent, broken place. Smoke still curled from ruined tipis, many of which had been set on fire. Personal belongings, blankets, cooking pots, children's toys, lay scattered and destroyed, mixed with the heartbreaking evidence of the massacre. The soldiers, after their brutal actions, did not leave immediately. Instead, they continued their terrible acts, desecrating the bodies of the dead and taking scalps as trophies. They moved through the camp, gathering any horses they could find and destroying what was left. Their actions were not just about fighting. They were about erasing the presence of the people who had lived there. The once clear creek now ran red with blood, and the peaceful sounds of nature were replaced by a chilling silence, broken only by the wind whistling through the ruins. Those few who had managed to escape the horror returned later to find their families gone, their homes destroyed, and their hopes shattered. The landscape itself seemed to mourn, bearing witness to the immense cruelty and loss that had unfolded on that terrible day. Sand Creek was no longer just a place. It was a scar on the land and on the hearts of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. In the immediate days after the massacre, Colonel Chivington and his men were celebrated as heroes in Denver. They were praised for a great victory against hostile Indians. But the truth, like a persistent whisper, could not be kept silent for long. As the few survivors began to tell their harrowing tales, and as some soldiers, horrified by what they had witnessed, spoke out, the story of Sand Creek started to change. News traveled slowly in those days, carried by riders, telegraph wires, and newspaper articles. But when the real details of the attack began to surface, that a peaceful camp had been attacked, that women and children were killed, that flags of peace were ignored, a wave of shock spread across the country. People in faraway cities reading their newspapers felt a deep sense of shame and anger. How could such a terrible thing happen? How could soldiers of the United States attack people who were under their protection? The initial cheers for Chivington turned into questions and then into outrage. Many people, including some important government leaders, demanded to know the full truth. The horrifying event at Sand Creek could no longer be hidden. It had become a dark stain on the nation's conscience. The shock and anger over the Sand Creek Massacre grew so strong that the U.S. government could not ignore it. People wanted answers. They wanted to know how such a terrible event could have happened, and who should be held accountable. So several official investigations were launched. Members of Congress and military leaders started asking tough questions. They called witnesses to speak, including some of the soldiers who had been at Sand Creek and the Native American survivors who could tell their stories. These hearings were like trying to piece together a very sad puzzle. People listened to the different accounts, trying to understand the full picture. Some soldiers bravely spoke about the horrors they saw, confirming that the camp was peaceful and that women and children were targeted. They described the flags of peace being ignored and the terrible acts committed after the main attack. Others, like Colonel Chivington, tried to defend their actions, saying they were fighting enemies. But the evidence, especially from those who saw the innocent victims, painted a very different and much darker picture. These investigations were a serious attempt to uncover the truth and figure out if anyone should be punished for the terrible things that happened that day. The investigations painted a clear and grim picture, leaving no doubt about the true nature of what happened at Sand Creek. As a result, Colonel Chivington's actions were met with strong disapproval from many people. His victory was no longer seen as brave, but as a shameful act of cruelty. Important leaders in the government and army, who once might have supported him, now spoke out against him. They said his actions were wrong and went against everything soldiers were supposed to stand for. Instead of being a hero, Chivington became a symbol of betrayal. Many felt that the U.S. government had broken its promise to protect the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. It was a deep betrayal of trust, not just to Chief Black Kettle and his camp, but to the idea of peace itself. People wondered how they could ever trust again if such agreements could be so easily broken with such terrible results. This feeling of betrayal echoed across the nation, making many question the fairness and honor of their own country's actions. The massacre was seen as a stain, a dark mark on the nation's history, showing how badly things could go when trust was shattered and innocent lives were taken. The condemnation of Colonel Chivington was important, but for the Native American tribes, especially the Cheyenne and Arapaho, the impact of Sand Creek ran much deeper and lasted much longer. The massacre shattered their faith in the U.S. government's promises. How could they trust a hand offered in peace when that same hand had struck them down so cruelly? The deep wound of Sand Creek made many tribes feel that they could no longer live safely alongside the white settlers or rely on any treaties. This broken trust led to more sadness and more fighting. Warriors who had once sought peace now felt they had no choice but to defend their people and their land with force. They believed the only way to be safe was to fight back against those who had betrayed them. This increased distrust fueled more wars and skirmishes across the plains, making the already tense situation even worse. The memory of the innocent lives lost at Sand Creek, the ignored flags of peace, and the broken promise became a bitter lesson. It taught them that words of peace could be empty, and that sometimes the only protection they had was their own strength. This dark event changed the future for many Native American people, making their path forward much harder and more dangerous. The Sand Creek Massacre, with its horrifying details and profound betrayal, became more than just a single event. It grew into a powerful symbol, standing for all the unfairness and harsh treatment Native Americans faced as settlers moved across the western lands. It showed how easily promises could be broken and how innocent lives could be taken in the name of progress. For many, Sand Creek highlighted the great imbalance of power. Native Americans, who had lived on the land for centuries, were often pushed aside, tricked, or attacked as the United States grew larger. The massacre was a stark example of how peace efforts were sometimes met with violence, and how the lives and rights of Native people were often ignored. It became a story told again and again, reminding people of the terrible injustices that happened during that time. When people spoke of the Indian Wars or the struggles of tribes, Sand Creek often came to mind as a clear instance of wrongdoing. It was a wound that would not heal, a constant reminder of the unfairness and cruelty that marked the expansion of the American West. Even though many years have passed since that terrible day in 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre is still remembered today. It remains a dark and sad chapter in American history, a story that teaches us important lessons. It's not a story we tell to celebrate, but one we share to understand the past and to make sure such wrongs are never repeated. Today there is a special place called the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. It is a quiet, thoughtful place where people can go to remember what happened and to honor the lives lost. Visitors can walk the grounds where the camp once stood and reflect on the tragedy. This site and the stories shared there remind us all about the true costs of war, betrayal, and misunderstanding. It teaches us how important it is to keep promises, to treat all people with kindness and fairness, and to respect different ways of life. The memory of Sand Creek urges us to value peace above all else, and to work hard to build a world where everyone feels safe and respected, no matter their background. It stands as a powerful reminder that history, even its darkest parts, holds valuable lessons for us all. The story of the Sand Creek Massacre is not an easy one to hear, but it is a story we must always remember. It teaches us about the terrible things that can happen when fear and prejudice take over, when promises are broken, and when one group of people does not respect another. The lessons from that dark day are still important for us all, even now. We learn that trust is a fragile thing, easily broken, and very hard to mend. We learn that true strength comes not from violence, but from understanding and working together. Most of all, Sand Creek reminds us that we must study history, even the parts that make us sad or uncomfortable. By remembering these past mistakes, we can try our very best not to make them again. We can strive to build a world where peace is truly valued, where every person's life is seen as important, and where respect is given to all cultures and ways of life. The echoes of Sand Creek call out to us, urging us to choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over ignorance, and peace over war. It is a powerful reminder that the future is shaped by the lessons we learn from the past.